A 57-year-old nurse from Ohio travels across 3 states to meet her online romance, believing she has found love again after years of loneliness. But what she discovers about his true identity and his shocking criminal network leaves her fighting for both her life savings and her safety. Rachel Martinez had spent 32 years caring for others as a registered nurse at Cleveland Medical Center. At 57, she possessed the kind of steady hands and calm demeanor that made patients feel safe during their most vulnerable moments. Her colleagues respected her expertise, and doctors trusted her judgment without question. But outside the hospital walls, Rachel carried a quiet loneliness that had settled into her bones like winter frost. Her husband Carlos had passed away 4 years earlier from cancer, leaving behind an empty house filled with memories and silence. Their children lived in different states, busy with careers and families of their own. While Rachel understood their lives had moved forward, the evenings stretched long and hollow. Friends encouraged her to get back out there, to try dating again. The thought terrified her. How do you start over at 57? Where do people her age even meet? The local coffee shops seemed filled with 20-somethings, with their laptops and complicated coffee orders. Church social events felt forced and awkward. Then her co-worker Janet mentioned online dating. Rachel had dismissed the idea initially, but after another lonely weekend spent organizing closets and watching old movies, she decided to give it a chance. What harm could it do to just look? She created a profile on a site specifically for people over 50, using a recent photo from her daughter's wedding where she looked genuinely happy. Rachel described herself honestly, a nurse who loved gardening, cooking for others, and quiet evenings reading mystery novels. The messages started slowly. Most seemed generic or inappropriate, but then she received one that stood out. It came from someone calling himself David Richardson, a 62-year-old retired construction manager from a coastal town in North Carolina. His profile showed a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, standing next to what appeared to be his own sailboat. David's first message mentioned specific details from her profile. He had noticed she enjoyed mystery novels and asked about her favorite authors. His writing felt thoughtful and genuine, unlike the copy-paste messages she had been receiving from others. Their correspondence began cautiously but grew warmer over the weeks. David shared stories about his late wife Margaret, who had died 5 years earlier. He described his small coastal town, his morning walks along the beach, and his volunteer work at the local animal shelter. He sent pictures of sunrises over the ocean and asked thoughtful questions about her work at the hospital. Rachel found herself looking forward to his messages each day. David seemed to understand the particular kind of grief that comes from losing a life partner. He never pushed for personal information or asked inappropriate questions. Instead, he shared recipes he was trying to perfect and asked for her advice about his sister's upcoming medical procedure. After 3 months of daily messages and weekly phone calls, David suggested they meet in person. He offered to visit Cleveland, but Rachel surprised herself by suggesting she visit him instead. She had never seen the ocean, and the idea of a small coastal town appealed to her more than showing David around her familiar but lonely city. Rachel's decision to travel surprised everyone, including herself. She had always been cautious, practical, but something about David felt different, safe. During their phone conversations, his voice carried the same gentle authority she recognized in the best doctors she worked with. He spoke about his deceased wife with tenderness, never comparing Rachel to Margaret, but sharing memories that showed his capacity for deep love and commitment. Her daughter Lisa called it impulsive and dangerous. Her son Michael worried about internet predators. But Rachel had been making life and death decisions in emergency situations for over 3 decades. She trusted her instincts about people, and everything about David felt genuine. David lived in Ocean View, a small town between Wilmington and the Outer Banks. He described it as the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the biggest excitement was the annual seafood festival, and where newcomers were welcomed with homemade casseroles. He owned his house outright, he said, a modest 2-bedroom cottage 3 blocks from the beach that had been his grandfather's. Their conversations revealed shared values and similar life experiences. Both had worked in service professions, both valued family above career advancement, and both felt somewhat lost after becoming widowed. David described the strange experience of cooking for one, of having no one to share daily observations with, of feeling invisible in social situations designed for couples. Rachel began planning her trip with the excitement of a teenager. She bought new clothes, got her hair styled, and even purchased a small digital camera to document her first ocean experience. David insisted on handling all the arrangements. He would pick her up at the Wilmington airport, show her around town, and she could stay at a charming bed and breakfast he knew well. The night before her departure, Rachel felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation she had not experienced in years. She packed carefully, including a few special items David had mentioned wanting to try, her famous chocolate chip cookies and a bottle of wine from a local vineyard. Her co-workers at the hospital threw her an impromptu going-away party, teasing her about her romance but also expressing genuine happiness that she was taking this chance. Even the usually gruff Dr. Patterson wished her luck, saying she deserved some happiness after all the care she had given others. As Rachel's plane lifted off from Cleveland, she felt simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. At 57, she was embarking on what felt like her first real adventure. The rational part of her mind whispered warnings, but her heart told her this was the right choice. David had shown her nothing but kindness, patience, and genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. The flight to Wilmington took less than 2 hours, but it felt like crossing into an entirely different world. Rachel had spent her entire life in Ohio, with occasional trips to visit family in neighboring states. The idea of palm trees and ocean breezes seemed almost magical. During the flight, she reread some of David's recent messages on her phone. He had sent detailed instructions about finding him at the airport, describing what he would be wearing and where he would wait. He seemed as excited as she was about finally meeting face to face, mentioning how much he looked forward to showing her his favorite local spots and introducing her to his friends. The Wilmington airport was smaller and more relaxed than Cleveland's busy terminals. Rachel collected her luggage with trembling hands, checking her reflection one more time in the bathroom mirror. She looked good for 57, she told herself. The new blouse brought out her brown eyes, and the coastal humidity was already making her hair curl in a way that looked intentional. David had said he would be waiting near the baggage claim wearing a blue polo shirt and khaki pants, holding a sign with her name. Rachel scanned the small crowd of people waiting for passengers, her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. She spotted him before he saw her. The man holding the Rachel Martinez sign matched his photos, but seemed somehow different in person. Maybe it was just the strangeness of seeing someone in 3 dimensions. After months of pictures and video calls, his smile, when he noticed her approaching, seemed genuine and warm. "Rachel, you look even more beautiful than your pictures," David said, stepping forward to give her a gentle hug. His cologne was expensive, maybe too expensive for a retired construction manager. But Rachel pushed the observation aside. People splurged on special occasions. "David, it is so good to finally meet you in person," Rachel replied, feeling suddenly shy despite their months of conversation. "How was your flight?" "Not too bumpy, I hope. Sometimes these coastal approaches can be rough," David said, taking her suitcase with practiced ease. As they walked toward the parking garage, David kept up a steady stream of conversation about the weather, the town's recent renovations, and his plans for showing her around. His car, when they reached it, surprised Rachel. Instead of the modest sedan she had expected, David drove a luxury SUV that looked nearly new. "Business was better than I let on," David said, noticing her expression. "Margaret always said I was too modest about our success." The drive to Ocean View took 45 minutes through increasingly rural landscape. David pointed out landmarks and shared local history, but Rachel found herself studying his profile as he drove. Something felt slightly off, though she could not identify what exactly. Maybe it was just the strangeness of being with someone she had only known through screens and phone calls. Ocean View turned out to be as charming as David had described. The main street featured weathered buildings housing antique shops, seafood restaurants, and tourist boutiques. Spanish moss, draped from ancient oak trees, and the salt air carried the sound of seagulls and distant waves. "It is beautiful," Rachel said honestly. "I can see why you love living here." "Wait until you see the sunrise tomorrow morning. I will take you to my favorite spot on the beach," David replied. pulling into the parking lot of a Victorian-style building with a discreet sign reading Ocean View Inn. The bed and breakfast was exactly as David had described, charming, historic, and welcoming. The elderly woman at the front desk greeted David by name and seemed genuinely pleased to meet Rachel. Her room on the second floor had a view of the ocean through lace curtains and antique furnishings that made her feel like she had stepped into a different century. "I will let you get settled," David said, after walking her to her room. "How about I pick you up for dinner in 2 hours? There is a wonderful seafood place I want you to try." Rachel agreed, feeling grateful for the time to decompress and prepare herself. Once alone in her room, she called her daughter Lisa to report her safe arrival. "How does he seem in person?" Lisa asked, the worry clear in her voice. "Charming. Exactly like I expected," Rachel said. But even as she said it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that something felt different, though she could not articulate what. Dinner at the Harbour View restaurant should have been perfect. The seafood was exceptional, the ocean view breathtaking, and David attentive without being overwhelming. He ordered wine without looking at prices, and insisted on appetizers, entrees, and dessert. When the check came, Rachel offered to split it, but David waved her away, with a laugh. "Please, Rachel, you are my guest." "This is my pleasure," he said, pulling out a credit card with practiced ease. But small details began accumulating in Rachel's observant mind. David's stories about his construction business kept changing slightly. First he had employed 12 people, then 20, then he mentioned a crew of 8. The timeline of his retirement shifted by several months between conversations. His knowledge of construction terminology seemed surprisingly limited for someone who had supposedly managed projects for 30 years. More concerning were his questions about her finances. During their months of correspondence, David had never asked about money. But now, over candlelit dinner, he began inquiring about her retirement savings, her pension from the hospital, and whether she owned her house outright. "I am just thinking ahead," David explained when Rachel's expression showed discomfort. "If we continue getting closer, these things matter for planning a future together." Rachel felt a chill despite the warm ocean breeze. They had known each other for 3 months and met in person 6 hours ago. Talk of combining finances seemed premature, even inappropriate. The next morning, David picked her up early for the promised beach walk. The sunrise was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that took Rachel's breath away. But David seemed distracted, checking his phone frequently and cutting their walk shorter than planned. "I have some business to handle this morning," he explained. "Why do not you explore the town? I will pick you up for lunch." Rachel spent the morning wandering Ocean View's small downtown, chatting with shop owners and other tourists. When she mentioned she was visiting David Richardson, several people looked blank. One elderly man at the hardware store said he had never heard of anyone by that name, despite claiming to know everyone in town. At lunch, Rachel decided to address her growing concerns directly. "David, I met some lovely people in town this morning, but no one seemed to know you, for such a small community. That surprised me." David's expression flickered for just a moment before his smile returned. "I keep to myself mostly. Margaret and I were pretty private people, plus I travel quite a bit to visit my kids." But David had told her he had no children. His late wife Margaret had been unable to conceive, he had said, which was one of their shared sorrows. Now he spoke of kids as if they had always been part of his life story. That afternoon, David suggested they visit his house. Rachel had been looking forward to seeing where he lived, but when they arrived at the address he had given, she found a modest rental cottage with a "for rent" sign in the yard. "I am between houses right now," David explained quickly, "renovating my real place. This is just temporary." But his explanation felt rehearsed, and Rachel noticed he had no key. They sat on the porch for 20 minutes while David made phone calls, claiming to reach his landlord about letting them inside. When no one answered, he suggested they return to town. "Tomorrow," David said as they drove back toward the inn, "I want to show you something special. But I need a small favor first." Rachel's nursing instincts, honed by decades of reading people in crisis, began screaming warnings. "What kind of favor?" "Well, my bank account got frozen temporarily. Some mix-up with my construction business taxes. I have a check coming, but I need to cover some expenses until it clears. Could you help me out with maybe $2,000? I will pay you back with interest as soon as my funds are available. The request hit Rachel like cold water. Every online dating article she had read warned about this exact scenario. Men who built relationships specifically to ask for money. She felt embarrassed, angry, and frightened all at once. I need to think about that, Rachel said carefully. David's demeanor shifted subtly. The warm smile became more forced, and his hand tightened on the steering wheel. Of course. I understand it is a lot to ask. But Rachel, I thought we had built real trust between us. This is just temporary. That evening, Rachel sat in her room at the inn with her laptop, finally doing the research she should have done months earlier. She started with basic searches for David Richardson in North Carolina, finding nothing that matched his supposed background. No business licenses, no obituary for a wife named Margaret, no property records. Then she tried reverse image searches on the photos David had sent her. Her hands shook as the results loaded. The sailing pictures came from a maritime magazine article. The beach house belonged to a vacation rental company. Most disturbing, the profile photos of David appeared on multiple dating sites under different names and backgrounds. Rachel felt sick. She had been corresponding with a complete fiction, but her nursing training kicked in, focusing her mind on practical next steps. She needed more information before confronting him or alerting authorities. Using her phone, Rachel called the Harborview restaurant, where they had eaten dinner. She asked to speak with the manager about a credit card issue from the previous evening. Sir, I am sorry to bother you, but the gentleman I dined with last night may have used a fraudulent card. Could you tell me what name was on the credit card he used? The manager checked his records. Let me see. Yes, the card was under the name Marcus Webb, not David Richardson. Rachel's blood ran cold. She thanked the manager and hung up, then immediately searched for Marcus Webb online. What she found made her stomach lurch. Marcus Webb was a convicted felon with a lengthy record of romance fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. His photo matched the man she knew as David Richardson. Exactly. According to court records, Marcus Webb had defrauded at least 12 women over the past 5 years, stealing amounts ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. His method was consistent. Establish online relationships with recently widowed women, arrange meetings in small towns where he could control the environment, then gradually escalate requests for money while isolating victims from their support systems. But Marcus had made a crucial mistake with Rachel. He had chosen someone whose profession required quick thinking under pressure, someone trained to spot inconsistencies and trust her instincts about danger. Rachel spent the next hour documenting everything she could find about Marcus Webb's criminal history. She saved screenshots, printed articles on the inn's business center computer, and compiled a comprehensive file. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She began planning her counterattack. Instead of fleeing immediately, Rachel decided to gather evidence that could help other potential victims and ensure Marcus faced consequences for his crimes. She called her daughter Lisa and explained the situation, asking her to contact the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center from Cleveland. "Mom, just get out of there now," Lisa pleaded. "Come home immediately." "I will, honey. But first, I am going to make sure this man cannot do this to anyone else." The next morning, Rachel met Marcus for breakfast as planned, but now she was armed with knowledge and purpose. She had spent her career dealing with people in crisis, including those who lied about symptoms, drug use, or domestic violence situations. She knew how to appear calm while gathering critical information. "David," she said over coffee, "I have been thinking about your financial situation. Before I can help, I need to understand more about your business and the bank issues you mentioned." Marcus, believing he still had her trust, began elaborating on his fictional problems. Rachel listened carefully, taking mental notes of every inconsistency and asking follow-up questions that revealed more holes in his fabricated background. When Marcus excused himself to use the restroom, Rachel quickly photographed his wallet, which he had left on the table, capturing images of multiple credit cards and identification documents with different names. Rachel's plan came together with the precision of a well-executed medical procedure. She had contacted local police that morning, providing them with Marcus Webb's criminal history and current location. She had also reached out to the FBI field office in Charlotte, as romance fraud crossed state lines and involved multiple victims. At lunch, Marcus made his move more aggressively. "Rachel, I hate to pressure you, but I really need that money today. My situation has become more urgent. Could you transfer $5,000 to help me out? I promise you will have it back within the week." Rachel looked at him calmly, drawing on the same steady demeanor she used when delivering difficult news to families. "Marcus, I think we need to talk honestly about who you really are." The change in his expression was immediate and frightening. The gentle, caring facade dropped completely, replaced by cold calculation and barely controlled anger. "I do not know what you mean," Marcus said, but his voice had lost all warmth. "Marcus Webb," Rachel said quietly, "convicted of romance fraud in Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina, currently wanted for questioning in connection with the theft of $43,000 from a widow in Virginia." Marcus started to stand, but Rachel continued speaking in the same calm, professional tone she used during medical emergencies. "The police are already on their way. I have documented evidence of your true identity, photos of your multiple credit cards, and recordings of the contradictory stories you have told me over the past 3 days." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "You stupid woman, you have no idea what you are dealing with." "Actually, I do," Rachel replied. "I have been dealing with people in crisis for 32 years. The difference is my patients were genuinely suffering. You create suffering deliberately." Within minutes, 2 police officers entered the restaurant. Rachel had arranged to meet them there, in a public space where Marcus could not become violent or attempt to flee easily. The arrest was swift and professional, with Marcus offering no resistance once he realized the situation was completely beyond his control. Detective Patricia Morgan, who led the investigation, told Rachel later that her evidence and testimony would be crucial in connecting Marcus to multiple fraud cases across several states. "Mrs. Martinez, I have to say, most victims in these situations lose their money and never see justice. Your actions have probably saved other women from being victimized and will help us prosecute this man effectively." Rachel returned to Cleveland with her savings intact and a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with sadness about human nature. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also reminded her of her own strength and capability. Back at the hospital, her colleagues listened to her account with amazement and pride. Dr. Patterson, normally sparing with compliments, told her she had handled the situation with the same courage and intelligence she brought to medical emergencies. "You turned a potentially devastating situation into a victory not just for yourself, but for other potential victims," he said. "That takes real character." Rachel did eventually return to online dating, but with much greater caution and awareness. She met Richard, a retired teacher, 6 months later through a mutual friend. Their relationship developed slowly, with plenty of verification and involvement from both their families. More importantly, Rachel began volunteering with organizations that educate older adults about online safety and romance scams. She shares her experience regularly, helping others recognize warning signs and trust their instincts when something feels wrong. "The most important lesson I learned," Rachel often tells audiences, "is that loneliness can make us vulnerable, but it does not have to make us victims. Our life experience and professional skills do not disappear just because we are looking for companionship. Trust those instincts that have served you well in other areas of your life." Marcus Webb was ultimately sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for multiple counts of wire fraud and elder abuse. The prosecution used Rachel's evidence and testimony as the foundation of their case, and several other victims came forward once his arrest became public. At 58, Rachel has found that her confidence in navigating relationships comes not from desperation or loneliness, but from knowing her own worth and trusting her ability to assess people and situations accurately. The skills that made her an exceptional nurse, observation, critical thinking, and calm decision-making under pressure, turned out to be exactly what she needed to protect herself and help others. Her children, initially mortified by their mother's adventure, now speak with pride about how she turned a dangerous situation into an opportunity to serve others and seek justice. If you found Rachel's experience valuable, please share this with others who might benefit from learning about romance fraud warning signs. The more we educate each other about these tactics, the fewer people will fall victim to predators who exploit our fundamental human need for connection and love. Remember, taking time to verify someone's identity and trusting your instincts when something feels wrong are not signs of paranoia, they are signs of wisdom.